episode of Robuilt. I'm your host, Rob, and if you like listening to this, then you're a freak. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Robuilt. I'm your host, Rob, and happy Cinco de Mayo. Coming at you at Cinco de Mayo. I know by the time you watch this, it's the Siete de Mayo, but it's fine. I'm feeling festive today. My son of an immigrant sweatshirt. Both of my parents were immigrants. My mom gave up a great job. My dad gave up being a doctor in Mexico to move here to provide a better life for me and my sisters. And so I like to wear this sweater as a reminder of why I do all of this. Not an ad, just like the sweater. Today I want to talk about why I think building a new construction is one of the safer, if not the safest form of real estate, at least as it pertains to my own experiences. Keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer, CPA, tax accountant, financial advisor, so, don't come sue me. But I want to give you my POV on this because I've been in real estate for about 4 years now and I've done a little bit of everything, and I'm really starting to solidify what my strategy is as a real estate investor. Generally speaking, in the 4 years that I've been investing in real estate, the real estate market has been pretty hot, but specifically in the last 2 years and even in the last 6 months, it's just gotten even crazier to the point where I'm seeing a lot of prices out there on just kind of old beat up shacks and older homes that need a lot of love that are very expensive. And so when I compare the price of buying a home that already exists to the price of building a house, it's hard for me to justify buying existing homes just because I know I can build something much nicer for much less. For the most part, let's just take a market that I'm actively investing in. Let's take Joshua Tree. If you look at a $300,000 house that you can actually buy, I think you might be a little surprised and a little disappointed at what $300,000 gets you in Joshua Tree, California. On the flip side, for what I've built for $300,000, it's significantly nicer than anything available in the market. Let's take Casa Mariposa, for example. I built that for $275,000 all in. There's no chance anywhere that I could ever find a house nearly as nice as that for anywhere near that price. I know because I sold it for a significant markup, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But on top of building a new house, one of the really big benefits of doing this is that your maintenance is going to be relatively low. If you're buying an old existing house, most of the time, a lot of those systems are a lot older. The roof, the plumbing, the electrical, you name it. And you're going to require a lot of maintenance, especially if you're running a short-term rental. You'll be very surprised at how often you're fixing little things here and there. Whereas whenever you build something new, it's pretty rare to get a phone call that anything is going wrong from a maintenance standpoint, just because everything is relatively new. Now, obviously, at some point, a lot of this stuff is going to require maintenance, and it's going to be something that you need to address over time. But for the first 5 years of owning a new construction, it's generally pretty smooth sailing. And generally speaking, a new construction is going to bring in a higher sell price than a very comparable home that's been completely remodeled. Now, that's not always the case, but it's certainly been my experience in Joshua Tree, having sold a newly constructed home, Casa Mariposa, and having received offers on Casa Conejo. And my speculation here is that most investors typically understand that a newly constructed home is going to be pretty turnkey and smooth sailing in terms of convenience and time. And we all know that time is money in real estate, especially when you're paying any sort of interest on your investment, especially if you have a high interest loan that's anywhere from 4 to 12%, construction loans, hard money loans, and everything in between. So let's just push pause on the monetary aspect of this. I would really say that for me, ultimately what I love about building a new construction is that it's very hands-on, and I truly get to realize a dream or a vision. And I will say that having done this a few times now, it never gets old visiting your construction site. It never gets old pulling up and seeing your home framed out and seeing it actually go from paper to a standing framed out building. To me, it really brings me great joy to see my creations actually come to life. Now, obviously, I'm not the one physically building it, but I am collaborating on it. I am the one that works hand in hand with my draftsmen to relay my vision to them to get it on paper. I am the one that's permitting it. I am the one picking all the finish outs and all of the different interior design details. And I am the one working with the contractor to get it across the finish line. So while I'm not the one necessarily swinging a hammer, it's my baby. And I made that. Whenever you walk into your house, especially at the very end, when you finally stage it and it's all done and you're going to list it on Airbnb, it's like almost, it's a little emotional. No, it's not. It's really cool. Look, it's just really cool to stand somewhere that you worked so hard for a year and look around and say, damn, I made this. This is so cool. It never gets old, ever. And really a huge advantage of building a new construction is that there are no surprises from a cost standpoint. And what I mean by this is that typically when you're working with a contractor and they give you a contract to build your home, that's the price that it's going to cost to build your house. There is no going back on it. I sign a contract with my contractor. If he messes something up, if he goes over his bid, that's something that he has to eat on his side. There's never a time where he says, oh my gosh, Rob, I missed this one thing. You actually owe me another $10,000 because there was a huge surprise whenever we framed it out. That never happens. On the flip side, if you're ever doing a remodel, I mean, all you can do is really plan as well as you can. But the moment your contractor starts ripping out your walls and starting to actually remodel the home, they can uncover so many things that can end up costing you so much money, putting you over budget. You know, if you start ripping out drywall and you find a dead body in there, no, I'm just kidding. If you start ripping out drywall and you find termite damage or roach infestations or rodent infestations, whatever it is, something like that can really cost you a lot of money. If they really get into the remodel and find out that there's an issue with the foundation, that foundation repair can cost you anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000, depending on how bad it is. There are so many surprises that can come with the remodel. And if any of you out there have ever remodeled a house and had a huge surprise, please leave me a comment down below and help me make this point that things never really go according to plan. Whereas with the new construction, everything is new. The wood is new. The windows are new. The doors are new. Nothing can really go wrong and kill your budget unless you just have a bad contractor that's always messing up. But for the most part, it's a pretty foolproof way of executing something on budget. The only way that you're going to pay more is if you start getting sneaky and you start saying, hey, contractor, I want you to add this. I want you to add this. I want you to add this. And you start adding things that weren't in the plans. Then your contractor is going to do a change order and charge you more because that does not uphold the original agreement that y'all made. So as long as you stick to what's on paper, for the most part, you're going to stay on budget, which is very rarely the case with the remodel. But if you've had a perfect remodel, I would also love to hear that down below. And actually, while you're down there, feel free to remodel that like button by turning it blue. All right, that was dumb, but just hit the like button, all right? You really do help me as a growing channel if you just hit that like button. And if you do, Editor Caleb will Venmo you $1.
Why you always lying?
Lastly, the thing that I love most about new constructions is just the amount of equity you can build into your house if you just spend the 12 to 18 months doing the work. I'll give you a couple of examples here, okay? So when I built Casa Conejo, I built that for $165,000. A couple months ago, I had an investor reach out and offer me $450,000 for that house. Now, I said no because I love that house. That house is my baby. A lot of the YouTube success I have is because of that house, and it's very sentimental to me, which breaks all rules of real estate investing. Never get too attached to your houses, folks, but that house is really special to me. And also I built that house as a way to provide passive income to my parents, hence why I'm doing all of this, right? And on my other project in Joshua Tree, Casa Mariposa, I built that for $275,000. Now, I closed on it. Final amount that I got was $670,000. It's a $400,000 markup. Now let's just think about that a bit. A $400,000 markup is insane. And honestly, to this day, I still really can't believe it, but that's how crazy the market is. I have that much wiggle room in the event of a catastrophic downturn. If I still owned it right now and we had an apocalyptic housing crash tomorrow, the housing market would have to crash over 100% before I lost money on that build. My house would have had to have devalued from $670,000 all the way down to $275,000 before I lost any money. And even if it had just devalued that $400,000, I still would have broken even and not lost money on that build. So there's so much padding with your equity when you build it from the ground up. And it makes a lot of sense because you're the person that's buying the land, you're doing the due diligence on the land, you're doing the permitting on it, you're working with your draftsman and your engineer and your architect, and you're going through permitting for several months, and you're working with the bank if you're going to finance it for many, many months. And if you're financing it with the new construction loan, it can take you anywhere from 14 to 18 months to build. If you're building it cash, it can still take you a year to build. So with that amount of time, you're basically working a job. You're working a job, and your salary is that equity that you're getting whenever you finish that final product. But on the flip side of all of this is that the person that bought my property for $670,000 would technically be upside down if we had any kind of market correction tomorrow. Luckily for them, it was immaculately designed and furnished, and they're booked 100% on Airbnb. So even though technically if the market did correct itself tomorrow, they're still making so much money from the Airbnb side of things that it still works out for them in the long run. But my point here being that technically they could be upside down if there was a market correction, whereas me, I had so much wiggle room to go. But generally speaking, if you're a buy and hold type of investor, you can really outlast any market correction anyway, and so they would be okay in the long run. But if you build it from scratch, you're that much more protected. And the same goes for Casa Conejo. If I had sold it to an investor for $450,000, they could also have been upside down on that with any kind of correction. Whereas on my side, I obviously had that $300,000 wiggle room protecting me from any kind of minor market correction. Honestly, even major, but We won't get into that this video. A quick note on all that, just to be totally transparent, I have a lot of high hopes for Joshua Tree and I plan on continuing to invest out there. In fact, if everything keeps going according to plan, I'll actually be building anywhere from 20 to 24 houses out in Joshua Tree this year, because I'm actually creating a fund where we're gonna raise millions of dollars to build super high-end, conceptual, cool, wacky, awesome homes and tiny homes and everything in between. I'm really excited about this. It's gonna be the biggest project that I've ever taken on, but it's gonna also be the coolest thing that I've ever done. So more to come on that. Now, I don't want to just shill for new construction. I want to give you some of the downsides of building a new home because I think that these are things that you should consider. All right, so one of the big disadvantages of building a new home is the time commitment that it takes to actually complete the home. Like I said, if you're building a house cash, that can take you anywhere from 10 to 14 months, probably not 10, really like 12 months in a great scenario, but 12 to 14 months just to keep it padded for you. And if you're doing a new construction loan, 14 to 18 months. Casa Mariposa took us 18 months. The actual build time was 9 months, but due to a pandemic and the banking logistics and the red tape and everything involved with the new construction loan, it just generally takes a lot longer. So I want you to make sure that you understand what you're getting into. A lot of people think, like myself when I got into this, oh, I want to build a tiny home. It'll take me 2 months to build. It's going to cost me $10,000. It's not how that works. Nothing takes 2 months except maybe a light remodel. But if you want to build a house, you're in this thing for at least a year. So make sure that you run the numbers and you understand the financial impact it'll have on you to have your money parked in an investment like that. Secondly, as I alluded on the last one, they're a little tough to finance. I mean, if you're trying to buy an existing home, financing is a much easier obstacle to overcome. But if you want to build something from the ground up, you have to work with a bank that's willing to offer you a new construction loan. And those aren't always the easiest to obtain. And typically a new construction loans are going to require anywhere from a 15 to 20% down payment. On top of that, it can be somewhat of a full-time job in the most inconvenient ways. You know, the process of building a new home has its highs and its lows in terms of your time commitment, but man, when it rains, it pours. And in the busiest season of a new construction, it can be really inconvenient to order tile or windows or doors or kitchen cabinets from IKEA that are back ordered for 2 months when you actually have a full-time job, a spouse, a family, dogs you need to take care of, other side hustles. It can all start to pile on very quickly. So it does kind of force you to be organized. And if you're not an organized person like myself, it can be pretty challenging. So you got to understand that, yeah, while you're not the one physically building the house, there is a job for you to complete to get this thing over the finish line. And then the last little thing, or maybe big thing with building a new construction, is the permitting and having to run the permitting yourself if that's something you're going to do. You can hire services to do that. They're typically pretty expensive. But if it's something you want to do, there's somewhat of a learning curve there. I typically think that permitting is somewhat of a linear process, and it's not too bad once you've done it a few times, but if it's the first time you've ever done it, it can be pretty stressful and overwhelming, but I promise you, you can get through it. In fact, I'm sort of tossing around the idea of creating a 2 to 3 hour program that teaches you how to build a house in Joshua Tree, because I've stopped my consulting service and a lot of you are emailing me like, no, why did you close it down? So to help serve some of you that are wanting to build a house in Joshua Tree, if that's something you'd be interested in, I guess let me know in the comments down below and I guess I'll do it if enough of you want it. But yeah, you know, I do really think that anyone can handle permitting, but it is something you want to consider because it's way more intense than just pulling like a window permit or a remodel permit. I mean, when you're permitting a new construction, you really have to parallel path everything. Parallel path working with your draftsman and your engineer and your architect and the city planner and the environmental agency and the septic company and all those people and more, and they don't like you and you don't like them and they don't like each other. So it's kind of hard to work with everybody and make sure everyone's on the same page. But if you're willing to learn, you can totally do it. So do I think you have to build a new construction? Absolutely not. There is no right or wrong answer here. It really depends on your situation and your finances and what you're comfortable with and what your goals are. And what I mean by that is if your goal is to make money right now, if you want to get into Airbnb right now and you're like, I'm ready to do this right here, right now, then no, building a new house is not practical because it's going to take you at least a year to get that done. If you're looking to get started in Airbnb now, then it's way more practical to buy a home that already exists, maybe fix it up a little bit if you want to get the best value out of that home, furnish it, and you could be running an Airbnb in as little as 30 to 45 days. So if your goal right now is to get started, then buy a house. There's nothing wrong with that. I just bought 3 houses on the East Coast. I would love to have built 3 houses on the East Coast, but I just don't have the time to do it. And I want to start cash flowing very quickly on money that I made from my Casa Mariposa sale. So we're parking it in 3 short-term rentals out there. That fits my current goal, so that was okay for me. But if I had more time and I could plan things out a little bit more and I wasn't under the constraints of a 1031 exchange, then I absolutely would have built houses from the ground up. And on the plus side, if you did want to buy a house, right now is a great time to do it because mortgage rates are super low. Plus, your down payment can be anywhere from 3.5% to 20%. Your options are 3.5%, 5%, 10%, and 20%, which is really going to depend on the use. If you want to do anything like a house hack where you live in the house and you rent out different rooms, that could be a 3.5% down payment for you. If you want to do a second home that you use as your second residence and occasionally rent it out as a short-term rental, you could maybe even go as little as 10%, or you could still do 20% if you want to avoid PMI. But regardless, you do have those different options. Whereas with the new construction, typically 15 to 20% is pretty standard. So again, I'm not a mortgage broker. Talk to your mortgage brokers about rules, regulations, cleared uses, and all that kind of jazz. But for the most part, I have found that you have a lot of options if you want to get into Airbnb right now by buying a pre-existing home. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I'll end that here. There's no right or wrong here, but I love building new constructions. I'm obviously very biased, but I've had really good success with them. I feel protected. I feel like my exposure level is pretty low from any kind of market correction. And when it fits my strategy, I'll also be buying pre-existing homes. So hopefully this wasn't too jarbled. Well, what do you think? Was I just kind of all over the place? I kind of feel like I was. I always feel like I'm all over the place. Hashtag ADHD. Anyway, all right, I'm tired. My throat hurts. It's 11:46 p.m., which is actually a record, and I've only been recording for 41 minutes. I hope you appreciate that, Caleb, because usually these come in at about 1 to 4 hours. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching this episode of Robuilt. I'm losing it. I'm losing myself, and I'm going to just cover up the lens now and stop talking. All right, see ya.